Now tell us, Doctor, what happened next to you and Sherlock Holmes?
It was nearly 1 o'clock when Holmes returned, carrying a sheet of blue paper scrawled over with notes and figures.
Well, Watson, my visit to the Doctor's Commons was not without its rewards. I have seen the will of the deceased wife to determine its exact meaning. Listen to this. At the time of his wife's death, Dr. Roylott's income was just short of £1,100. Through a fall in agricultural prices since that time, it now amounts to somewhat less than £750. In the event of marriage, each daughter is entitled to collect £250. Indeed, if even one of them were to marry, Roylott would be crippled to a serious extent.
Troubling. For the daughters, that is.
Most assuredly. And now, Watson, this is too serious for dawdling, especially as the old man is aware that we are interesting ourselves in his affairs. So, if you are quite ready, I should be much obliged if you would slip your old service revolver into your pocket. A Webley No. 2 can be a most excellent argument against out-of-control bullies.
What a perfect day it has turned out to be, considering the questionable start, eh, Holmes? A bright sun, fleecy clouds in the heavens, and a tree-lined lanes of South Surrey.
Quite a contrast, Watson, with the sinister quest upon which we are presently engaged.
Well, yes, I must say.
Look there! Stoke Moran.
A heavily timbered park stretched up in a gentle slope, thickening into a grove at the highest point. There sat the grey gables and high roof tree of a very old mansion. Yes, that be the house of Dr. Grimsby Roylott.
There is some building going on there. That is where we are going.
And there be the village, just there. But if you want to get to the house, you'll find it shorter to get over the stile here and then follow the footpath over the fields. There it is, where the young lady is walking.
Our Miss Stoner. Yes, I think we had better do as you suggest. Here's your fare, my good man. I thought it would be just as well that this fellow should think we came here as architects, perhaps, or on at least some definite business. It may stop his gossiping in the local pub.
Good afternoon, Miss Stoner.
Good afternoon, madam. You see that we have been as good as our word.
Oh, I'm so very grateful and happy to see you both. I've been waiting eagerly for you. But what of my stepfather?
We sent him on his way quickly enough. He'll be no further bother to us.
He's so cunning. I never know when I'm safe from him. What will he say when he returns?
He'd best guard himself, for there is now someone more cunning than himself upon his track.
You must lock yourself up from him tonight. If he is violent, we shall take you away to your aunt's at Harrow.
Now, we must make the best use of our time, so kindly take us at once to the room which we are to examine.
Stoke Moran Manor House was of a grey lichen block stone with a high central portion and two curving wings like the claws of a crab thrown out at each side. In the left wing, the windows were broken and blocked up with wooden boards, and the roof partly caved in, and the central portion was in scarcely better repair, the picture of ruin. But portions of the right-hand block were comparatively modern, and the decorative blinds in the windows, as well as the blue smoke curling up from the chimney, showed that this was where the family resided.
There is certainly scaffolding enough, but I see no signs of workmen at the moment.
Quite true, and a perfect working day.
Tell me about these windows.
This window belongs to the room in which I used to sleep, and the center window there belongs to my sister's room. That one on the other side looks out from my stepfather's chamber.
I see no very pressing need for repairs here.
There was none. I believe it was simply an excuse to remove me from my comfortable room.
Ah, that is suggestive.
On the other side of this narrow wing runs the corridor from which these three rooms open. There are, of course, windows in it as well, but all are very tightly nailed shut.
Considering that you kept your doors locked as well, your rooms were unapproachable then from that side. Now, would you have the kindness to go into your room and bar your shutters?
Certainly.
This matter gets deeper and deeper, Watson.
Right you are, Holmes.
I've done as you asked. They're locked.
Excellent. The latch shutters, too, are equally inaccessible. I'll just have a look at these joints with my lens. Oh, again, nothing. These hinges are ancient, but made of solid iron and built firmly into the massive masonry.
A bit of a dilemma.
This does present my theory with some difficulties. Well, we shall see if the inside throws any light upon the matter.
Here, past these brambles is the path to the side door.
We can ignore the third chamber. We will now examine the middle room in which Miss Stoner slept, or attempted to do so, last night.
The little room was a low-ceiling affair with a gaping fireplace, a brown chest of drawers in one corner, a narrow counterpaned bed in another, and a dressing table near the window. 2 small wicker work chairs and a Wilton carpet made up the rest of the furnishings. Holmes conducted a most thorough examination of everything, and this took some time.
This bell rope nearly obscured by the wall curtain here. Where does it communicate with?
It goes to the housekeeper's room.
It looks newer than the other things.
Well, yes, it was only moved there from the other side of the bed a couple of years ago.
Your sister asked for it?
No, I never even heard of her using it. We used always to get what we wanted for ourselves. Bell pulls were entirely unnecessary for our needs.
Just so. Oh, excuse me for a moment. I must satisfy myself as to this floor.
Quite without warning, in the space of a moment, Holmes was laying flat on the floor, face down, and crawling about like some mad creature. Having examined every inch of the heavy tiles that covered it, Holmes then bent to the task of pressing the lens hard against the cove base and low woodwork surrounding it.
I think now that I will just sit here for a moment. This curtain next to the bed, is it also new?
Yes, the old one was not quite so large, though it was still in excellent condition for its age.
I see. Let's just give the rope a tug. Why? It's a dummy.
Won't ring?
No, it isn't even attached to a wire. This is very interesting.
How absurd. The very idea.
Let's pull this curtain back and take a better look. You can see now that it is fastened to a hook here behind the edge of the curtain. And just below it is this little grilled opening for a ventilator, which appears to be operable only from your stepfather's side.
How odd.
I never noticed that before.
Very strange. There are 1 or 2 very singular points about this room. For example, why would a builder open a ventilator into another room when with the same trouble he might open it directly to the outside?
That is a rather modern concept.
And done about the same time as the bell rope.
Well, I believe so. There were several little changes made in this room about that time.
And changes of a most interesting character. Dummy bell ropes and ventilators which do not ventilate. With your permission, Miss Stoner, we shall now carry our researches into your stepfather's apartment.
Certainly.
Well, it is larger than yours, Miss Stoner, but just as plainly furnished. A small desk, a wooden shelf of technical books, 2 simple wooden armchairs.
Holmes walked slowly around the room and examined everything with the same care as before, regarding each item with the keenest interest.
What's this? A large iron safe.
Oh, yes,
What does your stepfather keep in the safe?
his business papers.
Oh, you have seen inside then?
Only once, some years ago. I remember that it was quite full.
There isn't a cat in it, for example?
Oh, what a strange idea.
Well, what of this saucer of milk? It was behind the safe.
Well, I don't know. None of us keeps a cat. There is a cheetah, the baboon.
Well, a cheetah is just a big cat.
A saucer of milk would hardly go as to satisfy its wants, I dare say. There is one point which I wish to determine.
Holmes then pulled out one of the wood chairs and thoroughly examined the seat of it with the lens.
That is quite settled. Hello, here is something interesting.
That small dog's lash there? Come now, Holmes.
See, my dear Watson, how it has been curled up upon itself and tied so as to make a loop of whipcord.
I say, well,
What do you make of that?
it's a common enough lash. I don't know why it should be tied.
That is not so common, is it?
Well, I guess it's not.
It's a wicked world, and when a clever man turns his brains to crime, it is the worst of all. I think that I have seen enough now, Miss Stoner, and with your permission, we shall go out to the lawn for a short walk.
I had never seen my friend's face so grimly dark as it was when we turned to leave the scene of this investigation. We had walked several times up and down the lawn, neither Miss Stoner nor myself liking to break in upon Holmes's thoughts. Then suddenly, Holmes wheeled around and gave us both quite a start.
It is very essential, Miss Stoner, that you should absolutely follow my advice now in every respect.
I shall most certainly do so.
The matter is too serious for any hesitation. Your life may well depend upon your exact compliance.
I assure you that I am completely in your hands.
In the first place, both my friend and I must spend this night in your room.
Holmes?
Whatever you say.
Yes, it must be so. Let me explain. I believe that is the village inn over there.
Yes, that is the Crown Arms.
Very good. Your windows would be visible from there then.
Certainly.
When your stepfather comes back, you must confine yourself to your room tonight, on pretense of a headache. Then, when you hear him retire for the night, you must open your shutters of your window, undo the hasp, put your lamp there as a signal to us, and then you must immediately and very quietly withdraw from your room.
Withdraw?
Ah, yes, of course.
Yes, take everything which you are likely to want into the room which you used to occupy. I have no doubt that, in despite of the repairs, you can manage there quite perfectly well for one night.
Oh, yes, easily.
Good. The rest you will leave in our hands.
But what will you do?
We shall spend the night in your room, and we shall investigate the cause of these noises which have been disturbing you.
I believe that you already suspect what that might be.
Perhaps.
Then for pity's sake, tell me, what was the cause of my sister's death?
I should prefer to have clearer proofs before I speak.
You can at least tell me whether my own thought is correct, that she died from a sudden fright.
No, I do not think so. Something more tangible, I conjecture, is the cause behind all of this. And now, Miss Stoner, we must leave you, for if Dr. Roylott returned and saw us, our journey would be in vain. Goodbye, and be brave. For if you do precisely what I have told you, you may rest assured that we shall soon drive away the dangers that threaten you. Well, Watson, we have eaten rather well. We can relax here in our upper floor sitting room with an unobstructed view to the manor house windows. And here by us sits a pot of excellent coffee to keep us sharp.
True enough.
For goodness sake, then, let us have a quiet pipe and turn our minds for a few hours to something a little more relaxing.
I say, what the deuce is that?
Curse you for a damn fool, boy, you oafish lout! Give way, I say! Open the damnable gate this instant, or I'll thrash you within an inch of your life. You'll regret it, fool! Give way!
Our good friend has returned at last. The night is about to unroll before us, Watson. Some coffee?
Ah, they're lighting the evening lamps in the sitting rooms.
You know, Watson, I really have some scruples as to taking you tonight. There is a distinct element of danger.
Can I be of assistance?
Your presence might be invaluable.
Well, then there's nothing to say.
It is very kind of you.
Nonsense. You speak of danger. You have evidently seen more in those rooms today than was visible to me.
No, I think not. But I fancy that I may have deduced a little more. I imagine you saw all that I did.
Well, I saw nothing remarkable save the bell ropes. And what purpose that could answer, I confess, is more than I can imagine.
You saw the ventilator too?
Yes, but I do not think that it's such an unusual thing to have a small opening between two rooms. It was so small that a rat could scarcely pass through.
I knew that we should find a ventilator before ever we came to Stoke Moran.
My dear Holmes.
Oh, yes, I did. You remember Miss Stoner's statement that she said her sister could smell Dr. Roylott's cigar? Now, of course, that presupposed at once a communication between the two rooms. It could only be a small one, or it would have been remarked upon at the coroner's inquiry. I deduced a ventilator.
But what harm can there be in that?
Well, there is at least a curious coincidence of dates. A ventilator is made, a curtain and a cord are hung, and a lady who sleeps in the bed dies. Does that not strike you?
I cannot as yet see any connection.
Did you observe anything very peculiar about the bed?
No.
It was clamped to the floor. Did you ever see a bed fastened like that to a clay tile floor before?
Can I say that I have?
The lady could not move her bed. It must always be in the same relative position to the ventilator and to the rope, or so we may call it, since it was clearly never meant for a bell pull.
Holmes, I do seem to see dimly that what you're hinting at, we are only just in time to prevent some subtle and horrible crime.
Subtle enough and horrible enough. When a doctor does go wrong, he is the first of criminals. He has nerve and he has knowledge. In their time, the infamous Charing Cross master criminals, Doctors Palmer and Pritchard, were the paragons of the medical profession. But somehow, this man strikes even deeper. Yet I think, Watson, that we shall be able to strike deeper still. But we shall have horrors enough before the night is over. Here, my friend, we shall think on things a bit more cheerfully. Let us ring to have our coffee refreshed, shall we?
About 9 o'clock, the sitting room lights were extinguished, and all was dark in the direction of Stoke Moran. 2 hours passed slowly, and then, suddenly, just at the stroke of 11, a single bright light shone out right in front of us.
That is our signal. It comes from the middle window, Watson. We have no time to lose. We must tell the desk clerk that we are making a late visit to an acquaintance and may be spending the night there.
We've a dark night to contend with and a chill wind in our faces. I say, do you really need the cane?
I dare say we will be needing it soon enough.
That yellow light in Miss Stoner's room.
It is. We should have little difficulty entering the grounds. See there where that breach in the park wall remains as yet unrepaired?
We crossed the lawn without incident and were about to enter through the window when out from a clump of laurel bushes darted what seemed to be a hideous and distorted child. It threw itself upon the grass with writhing limbs and fiendish cries and then disappeared swiftly into the darkness. My God, did you see it?
I had forgotten the strange pets which the doctor affected. That was the baboon.
There was a cheetah too. Perhaps we might find it upon our shoulders at any moment.
Shortly we will be in the room. Now, be very quiet. Here, put your foot in my hands and climb up.
We both soon found ourselves safely inside the bedroom, and I confess I felt easier in my mind. In the lantern light, my companion noiselessly closed the shutters, moved the lamp onto the table, and looked carefully around the room, missing nothing. All remained as we had seen it in the daytime.
From now on, it will be crucial to speak only like this, and only when absolutely necessary. The least sound would be fatal to our plans.
I nodded that I understood.
We must sit tonight with no light. He would see it through the ventilator.
I nodded again.
Do not go asleep. Your very life may depend on it. Have your pistol ready in case we should need it. I will sit on the side of the bed, and you in the chair.
I took out my revolver and laid it silently on the corner of the table. Holmes had placed the cane on the bed next to a box of matches and a stump of candle. A moment later, at a signal from Holmes, I turned down the lamp. The shutters cut off the least ray of light, and we waited in absolute blackness. How shall I ever forget that dreadful vigil? I could not hear a sound, not even the drawing of a breath. And yet I knew that my companion sat open-eyed in that dark, within a few feet of me, in the same state of nervous tension. From outside came the occasional cry of a night bird, and once at our very window a long-drawn cat-like whine which told us that the cheetah was indeed at liberty. Far away we could hear the deep tones of the parish clock, which boomed out every quarter of an hour. How long they seemed, those quarters. Finally, after an interminable period, the clock struck 3. Still we sat waiting silently for whatever might befall. Suddenly there was a momentary gleam of light up in the direction of the ventilator, which vanished immediately, but was succeeded by a strong smell of burning oil and the slight cracking of heated metal. Someone in the next room had lit a dark lantern. I heard a gentle sound of movement. And then all was silent once more, though the smell grew stronger. For half an hour I sat with straining ears. We began to hear faint music. Then suddenly another sound became audible. A very gentle, soothing sound, like that of a small jet of steam escaping continually from a kettle. The instant that we heard it, Holmes sprang from the bed, struck a match to the candle, and lashed furiously at the bell pull with the cane.
You see it, Watson? You see it?
But I saw nothing. At the moment when Holmes struck the light, I heard some low music of some sort, but the sudden glare flashing into my weary eyes made it impossible for me to tell what it was, at which my friend lashed so savagely. I could, however, see that Holmes' face had grown deadly pale, and that it was filled with horror and loathing. We both found ourselves gazing up at the lit ventilator, when suddenly there broke from the silence of the night the most horrible cry to which I have ever listened. They say that way down in the village, and even in the distant parsonage, that cry raised the sleepers from their beds. It struck cold to our hearts. When at last the echoes had died away, I gasped, "What can it mean?"
It means that it is all over. And perhaps after all it is for the best. Take your pistol and we will enter Dr. Roylott's room.
With a grave face, Holmes lit the lamp and led the way down the corridor. Twice we struck at the chamber door without any reply from within. Then Holmes turned the handle and entered. I at his heels with a pistol cocked in my hand at the ready. It was a singular sight which met our eyes. On the table stood a dark lantern with the shutter half open, throwing a brilliant beam of light upon the iron safe and the door, which was ajar. Beside this table, on the wooden chair, sat Dr. Grimsby Roylott, clad in a long grey dressing gown. Across his lap lay the short stock with the long lash which we had noticed earlier.
See, Watson, how his chin is cocked upward and his eyes are fixed on that dreadful stare onto the ventilator in the corner?
His brow, curious. That peculiar yellow band with the brownish speckles that is bound so tightly around his head.
The band. The speckled band.
It's moving! Roylott's strange headgear suddenly reared itself from its dreadful place, and it showed its squat diamond-shaped head and puffed neck, a loathsome serpent.
The swamp adder, Watson, the deadliest snake in India. Take care. He has died within 10 seconds of being bitten.
My God!
Violence does in truth recoil upon the violent, and the schemer falls into the very pit which he digs for another. Let us thrust this creature back into its den, and we can then remove Miss Stoner to some place of shelter. We'll let the county police know what has happened.
Holmes took the dog whip swiftly from the dead man's lap, and throwing the noose around the reptile's neck, quickly drew it from its horrid perch. Carrying it at arm's length, Holmes threw it into the iron safe and closed the door upon it. Such are the true facts of the death of Dr. Grimsby Roylott of Stoke Moran. It is not necessary that I should prolong a narrative which has already run too great a length by telling how we broke the sad news to the terrified girl, and how we conveyed her by the morning train to the care of her good aunt at Harrow, Nor need I speak of how the slow process of official inquiry came to the conclusion that the doctor met his fate while indiscreetly playing with a dangerous pet.
Well, Doctor, that was really something. I can't wait to hear how you'll wrap it up. Thanks for sharing it with us. You know, I'm not exactly a coward, but my toes curl up when I get around snakes.
Well, Mr. Gumby, you're rather more of a wine expert than a snake expert, I say, and there is nothing wrong in that.
Well, that's very kind of you, Doctor, but I'm not really any kind of a wine expert. All I know about wine is that it either tastes good or it doesn't. And I also know that Petri wine always tastes good. The Petri family sees to that. The name Petri on the label is the personal assurance of the Petri family that every drop of wine in the bottle is good wine. And they know how to make it good because they've been making fine wine for generations, handing down from father to son and then again from father to son every secret, every skill of the winemaker's art. Yes, the Petri family took the time to bring you good wine, and that's why no matter what kind of wine you wish, you can't go wrong with a Petri wine. Now, Doctor, tell us the conclusion of The Adventure of the Speckled Band.
Well, the little which I had yet to learn of the case was told me the next day by Holmes as we traveled back to London.
I had come to an entirely erroneous conclusion, Watson, which shows, my dear fellow, how dangerous it always is to reason from insufficient data. The presence of the gypsies and the words spoken by that poor girl was sufficient to put me upon an entirely different track. I instantly reconsidered my position when it became clear to me that no danger threatened any occupant of that room from either the window or the door. Confirming the presence of the ventilator and discovering the bell rope to be a dummy and the bed itself to be clamped to the floor, I instantly suspected a bridge, a way for something to pass through the hole, down the rope, and onto the bed. The idea of a snake occurred to me then immediately. Such a creature might easily be among those Roylott was receiving regularly from India. Roylott's familiarity with a rare poison for which no chemical test yet existed in England made it all quite obvious. The man must have felt that the rapidity with which the poison took its fatal effect was an added advantage. Only a very sharp-eyed coroner indeed would ever distinguish the two dark punctures where the serpent's tiny fangs had done their work. The music, the whipcord, and the milk for training purposes, and the safe, of course, also fitted themselves quite nicely into the scenario. Roylott would put the beast through the ventilator at whatever hour and as many times as were needed. When the milk was there by the safe, he knew that the snake must eventually crawl back to him. It might or might not bite the occupant. Perhaps she could escape every night for a week. But sooner or later she must inevitably fall a victim. I knew all of this before ever we left Roylott's room. His chair showed signs that he stood upon it frequently to regularly reach the ventilator. Having made up my mind, I put the matter immediately to the proof, and when I heard that creature hiss, I instantly lit the light and I attacked it. That I drove it back up and through the ventilator, where it instantly turned upon its master, was completely unexpected. Apparently, some of the blows of my cane came home, and I roused its snakish temper. In this way, I am no doubt indirectly responsible for Dr. Grimsley Roylott's death, and I cannot say that it is likely to weigh very heavily upon my conscience.
Well, Dr. Watson, it's been a real pleasure spending this time with you this afternoon.
My pleasure, Mr. Gunby. My pleasure entirely. Now, I think I'll have Mrs. Hudson bring along a fresh pot of tea. Don't suppose you'd care to join me?
Oh, no, thank you, Doctor. We better be moving along. Now, folks, don't miss next week's thrilling story when we return with the new adventures of Sherlock Holmes. And, Dr. Watson, I trust you'll be back with us?
Yes. As to that, well, I'll be relating a startling adventure that Holmes and I had many years ago, involving a series of bonfires, an underground cellar filled with gunpowder, and a strange death amid the rooftops of London.
Tonight's Sherlock Holmes radio play was adapted by Ken Jones from Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's 1892 story, The Adventure of the Speckled Band. In our cast were Ali Budge as Sherlock Holmes, Jonathan Hibbs as Dr. Watson, Anne Bigelow as both Helen and Julia Stoner, Al Gunby as Dr. Roylott, and Jonathan Hibbs as the trap driver. The onstage sound effects and control booth were by Larry Blaine and David Bryant. The light booth operator was Tina Williams, and Megan Hennings provided our onstage music. The production has been under the direction of Ken Jones, and I have been privileged to be your announcer, Al Gunby. Tune in next time when Radio on the Air will bring you another fine story from our radio play archives. And now, good night. This is the American Broadcasting System.